The chamber was vast, carved into the heart of a station that had seen ages rise and fall. 12 alien civilizations had gathered here, and now, as the crystalline ambassador Keleron activated the holographic display, silence fell heavier than gravity itself. Light spilled across the room, refracted by Keleron's body, scattering into fragile beams that illuminated the faces of council members. Data scrolled in the air, numbers, graphs, energy readings, and each one climbed higher, breaching thresholds no one had ever believed possible. For these beings, the most advanced civilizations of known space, such data should have been impossible. High Chancellor Vex leaned forward in his massive chair. All three of his eyes narrowed, ancient with decades of diplomacy yet suddenly uncertain. He had seen countless wonders across his 40 years on the council, but never this. The readings defied everything their sciences had built, everything their civilizations had agreed was true. The energy alone, it would take the fire of an entire star just to keep such a vessel alive at minimum capacity. And yet, the sensors did not lie. Keleron's crystalline frame shimmered faintly, betraying a rare anxiety. His people, the Vine Collective, had roamed the galaxy as scouts for millennia. They were the Watchers, the ones who discovered and catalogued. But this discovery had shaken even them. 3 cycles ago, Keleron began, voice harmonizing like chimes in the wind, our long-range ships detected a signal at the edge of a small system. A world belonging to a species you know only as humans. The chamber stirred. Humans, primitive, young, only discovered 40 years ago when their crude radio chatter spilled into the void. They were meant to be observed, not touched. Watched like children playing with dangerous tools until they were ready. But this was different. At first, the energy readings had been dismissed as errors. Yet when recalculated, and then recalculated again, the numbers remained. Something vast, something that should not exist, was being built in orbit around humanity's 4th planet. Voices broke the silence at once, overlapping in a dozen languages, translators scrambling to keep pace. Some shouted for explanation, others for war. It was Counselor Mirith, usually calm, whose feathers trembled as she stood. Her voice wavered as she asked the question they all dreaded. How large is it? The chamber froze, breath suspended, as Keleron raised his hand and brought forth the image. Numbers spiraled into the air in universal mathematical code, understood by every species present. 15 kilometers long. Mass equivalent to a small moon. Armor thicker than any council fleet could breach with sustained fire. Weapons beyond classification. Power generation greater than an entire flotilla. And, a crew. Over 50,000 humans lived within its hull. The silence was suffocating. Even the translators seemed to hesitate. Finally, War Master Thuran of the Krell Dominion growled, his voice shaking the walls. His people had ruled through fear for centuries. They had built dreadnoughts 3 kilometers in length and thought them invincible. Yet this human vessel was 5 times greater, and built by a species barely capable of traversing the stars. How, he demanded. How does a child species construct what our greatest engineers say is impossible? Keleron's form pulsed dimly as he explained. For decades, his people had watched humanity, gathering fragments of who they were, their history, their wars, their achievements. And the truth was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Humans were violent by any standard. 200 wars in a single millennium. Cities razed. Millions dead. Again and again they fought themselves, only to rise from the ashes stronger, more unified. Yet there was something else. When faced with extinction, humans cooperated in ways almost no other species could. Their ability to set aside differences and unite for survival bordered on unnatural. The holograms shifted. Images of humanity appeared, sprawling cities of billions, industries producing on unimaginable scales, laboratories pushing the boundaries of knowledge with reckless ambition. And armies, countless armies, divided among nations, each armed with weapons that had once threatened their own existence. They nearly destroyed themselves, Keeleron explained, with nuclear fire. They survived only through the fear of mutual annihilation. And yet, within decades, they reached into space, to other planets, to the stars themselves. Science Director Pelnak, his limbs coiling with curiosity, could not hold back. How is it possible? Their advancement has been impossible. From primitive computers to interstellar drives in less than a century. What takes others thousands of years, they achieve in a handful of generations. The data confirmed it. Humanity's Titan-class warship had been under construction for 30 years, with every nation on Earth contributing resources and mines. A species divided, and yet united in this one colossal act. The irony was bitter. The humans had built their ship as a safeguard against unknown cosmic threats, never realizing those threats already watched them. Darren's claws scraped the table, fury in his voice. Strike now. While the beast still sleeps in its cradle. Destroy the vessel before it leaves their system, before it disrupts the balance we have fought to preserve. His words found eager allies. The Televi rose, voices sharp, declaring that humanity was a risk too great. A species built on conquest, still fractured into nations, still armed to the teeth. If they turned outward with such aggression, no world would be safe. The call for war echoed in the chamber. But High Chancellor Vex raised his hand. The room fell silent. His voice was calm, but it carried the memory of history. We swore, long ago, never again to strike first. The Krell nearly annihilated the Yelnar for the same fear, and now the Yelnar are among our most peaceful kin. If we act with fear, we become the very thing we claim to resist. Mirith added her own caution. And if our sensors are true, the human vessel could survive even our combined fleets. Strike and fail, and humanity will never forgive. Their first act of contact would be war, a war none of us are prepared to face. The chamber held its breath. Keeleron's voice returned, softer now, carrying both warning and hope. Yes, they are violent. But they are also capable of growth. In a single century they have gone from world war to world unity. The ship they built is not the achievement of one nation, but of their entire species. That is not just a weapon. It is evidence of transformation. Pelnak's limbs waved in agreement. Their minds are extraordinary. Their physics crude, yes, but flashes of brilliance shine through. If guided, if nurtured, they could expand knowledge for all of us. To destroy them would be to burn a future not yet written. For hours, the council argued. War. Isolation. Sabotage. Diplomacy. Every option carried danger. At last, Vex's deep voice rumbled through the hall. We will not strike. We will extend our hand. Humanity shall be offered first contact, a meeting on neutral ground. Let them prove who they are through words, not through fear. Duren spat his disdain. Weakness. But Vex only shook his massive head. Wisdom. The vote was taken. Barely but enough. The Galactic Council would invite humanity to step into the light of the galaxy. And far away, aboard the massive vessel humanity called Goliath, a new story was about to begin. The Goliath moved through the void like a shadow of eternity. From a distance, it resembled a drifting moon of polished metal, its armored skin reflecting the cold light of Sol. Up close, however, its sheer scale became overwhelming. 15 kilometers of reinforced alloy, reactors humming with the power of captured suns, and weapons arrays capable of breaking worlds. Yet, within that vastness, the heartbeat of the ship was unmistakably human. Captain Alara Vey stood in the observation deck, gazing at the curve of Earth below. Her reflection shimmered faintly against the glass, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. For 30 years, she had served in the unified Terran Navy. She had seen the wars of unification, the bitter rivalries between nations, and the fragile treaties that bound them together. And now, she stood as the first commander of a vessel not built by one country, but by all of humanity. The Goliath was more than a warship. It was a promise. Behind her, Admiral Kane entered, his steps measured, his voice heavy with experience. He had fought in the last global conflict, when nuclear fire nearly consumed the Earth. He carried those scars still, both on his body and in his memory. "You're staring at it again," Kane said softly. Elara did not turn. "It still feels unreal. We were children playing in the dirt a century ago. Now we've built this." Kane's eyes narrowed at the planet below, his jaw set. "Don't mistake ambition for innocence. Humanity doesn't build for peace. We build because we are afraid." She finally turned toward him, searching his face. "Afraid of what?" "Of ourselves," Kane replied. "And of what waits in the dark." It was the unspoken truth that had driven the Goliath's creation. Humanity had looked to the stars and seen both promise and threat. Ancient radio signals hinted at the possibility of others. Astronomers found ruins on distant moons, traces of structures too precise to be natural. Whispers of the unknown had become louder every year. And so, humanity did what it always did when cornered by fear: it built a weapon. But for Elara, the Goliath meant something more. "Fear may have started this, Admiral. But unity finished it." For the first time in history, every nation, every people, worked toward one goal. That means something. Kane studied her for a long moment, then allowed the faintest smile. "Perhaps. But remember, unity forged in fear is fragile. If we do not give humanity a higher purpose, fear will tear us apart again." Their conversation was interrupted as Commander Idris, Chief of Communications, entered. His eyes were wide, his voice edged with disbelief. "Captain, Admiral, we've received a signal." The words hung in the air like gravity itself. For decades, humanity had listened to the stars, waiting, hoping, fearing. And now, for the first time, the stars had spoken back. Elara's pulse quickened. "Origin." Idris hesitated, as though saying it aloud would make it more real. "Not Earth. Not human. It's alien. Structured, deliberate, and addressed to us." The Admiral's eyes hardened. He had expected this day, but expectation was different from reality. "Put it through." The bridge came alive. Screens flickered, translators engaged, and a voice, strange, resonant, layered with tones beyond human range, filled the air. "To the people of Earth. To the builders of the vessel you call Goliath. We are the Galactic Council. We have watched you. We invite you to parley, to speak as equals among the stars." The voice ended. Silence returned. For a long moment, no one moved. Elara finally exhaled. "They know us." Idris nodded, still pale. "They've been watching, for who knows how long." The Admiral folded his arms, his thoughts already racing ahead. "Then the question isn't whether we answer. It's how." The debate consumed the ship. In conference halls and mess decks, in private quarters and public forums, the crew wrestled with the implications. Humanity was no longer alone. The question was whether this council of alien civilizations was friend or foe. Some, like Chief Engineer Rourke, saw only danger. "You don't build a council unless you've fought wars to get there," he argued bitterly. "They're stronger than us, older than us. That invitation is just a way to measure the threat we pose. And when they realize what we've built," he gestured to the walls around them, "they'll strike first." Others, like Dr. Sana of the Science Division, urged hope. "Every species starts somewhere. Perhaps they see in us a reflection of themselves. Perhaps this is not a threat, but an opportunity, to learn, to share, to step into something greater than we've ever known." The crew was divided. So too was Earth. Nations broadcast their opinions, citizens filled networks with debate, and leaders argued over the meaning of the invitation. Some demanded caution. Others cried for peace. A few whispered of preemptive war. But in the end, humanity did what it had always done. It argued, it doubted, it feared, and then, through the storm of voices, it chose. The United Terran Assembly, by the narrowest of votes, declared that humanity would accept the invitation. Not as servants. Not as supplicants. But as equals. And so, preparations began. The Goliath was chosen as humanity's emissary, not merely because it was their greatest creation, but because it carried within its hull the very essence of who they were. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, medics, diplomats, poets, 50,000 souls bound together in a living cross-section of the human spirit. Elara walked the corridors as the days passed, watching her crew. She saw fear, yes, but also something more, curiosity, resilience, and above all, defiance. Humanity had always been underestimated, even by itself. Perhaps the galaxy would make the same mistake. The Admiral joined her during one of her walks. They paused at a viewport, watching the stars drift by. "Do you believe they'll accept us?" she asked quietly. Kane's gaze was steady, his voice low. "No. Not at first. To them, we'll be dangerous, unpredictable, a storm waiting to break. But they'll learn." She tilted her head. "Learn what?" He smiled faintly, though his eyes were grim. "That humanity doesn't bow." When the day came, the Goliath left Earth orbit in silence. Billions watched from below as the massive vessel fired its drives and vanished into the dark. For many, it was a moment of pride. For others, a moment of fear. But for all of humanity, it was history. They were no longer just dwellers of one small planet. They were wanderers on the galactic stage. And as the stars stretched before them, Elara whispered a thought she would never dare speak aloud. "Let them see us. Let them judge us. But let them never forget us." The Goliath sailed onward, carrying not just humanity's power, but its question. Not will we survive? But what will we become? The meeting place was not a world, but a construct, a station older than any star-charted empire. It hung in the void between systems, its surface carved with patterns so ancient that even the Galactic Council no longer remembered who had built it. To the Council, this station was neutral ground. To humanity, it was a threshold into the unknown. The Goliath approached in silence. Its engines dimmed, its weapons powered down, but even dormant, its presence was overwhelming. The warship dwarfed the station itself, casting long shadows across its surface as if humanity had arrived not as guests, but as giants. Inside the council chamber, unease rippled through the gathered delegations. Their fleets had taken positions nearby, a defensive ring bristling with weapons. Yet even among so many ships, the Goliath loomed like a predator among prey. Chancellor Vex sat at the center of the chamber, his immense form radiating calm. But beneath his heavy brow, his eyes betrayed worry. If the humans had built one Goliath, how many more could follow? The chamber's great doors opened. A delegation stepped inside, their movements deliberate, their uniforms simple but precise. Humans. Flesh and bone among a sea of scales, fur, feathers, and crystal. At their head walked Captain Elara Vey, her stride steady, her gaze unflinching. Beside her was Admiral Kane, his presence sharp as a blade. They had chosen not to send politicians, but those who bore the burden of command. Soldiers, explorers, leaders forged in the crucible of survival. A murmur passed through the chamber. These were not diplomats trained in honeyed words. These were humans, raw, unpolished, dangerous. The council translator resonated, its voice filling the chamber. "You are welcome, representatives of Earth. Speak." Elara stepped forward, her voice carrying clear across the vast space. "We are humanity. Children of Earth. We come not in submission, nor in conquest, but in recognition. We know now that we are not alone. And we choose to meet you as equals. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling through every delegation. Some bristled at the audacity. Others watched with a flicker of something that might have been respect. War Master Thurin of the Krell bared his teeth. Equals. You presume much, child of Earth. The Council is forged of civilizations that span millennia. You are infants in the stars. And yet you arrive with a weapon of war. His claw gestured toward the hologram of the Goliath, displayed above them. What do you seek? Fear. Ilara met his gaze without flinching. We seek survival. The Goliath was not built for you. It was built for what may lie beyond. Tell me, War Master, does your council claim the whole of the galaxy? Do you know every star, every shadow? Or do you too fear what waits in the dark? The chamber stirred. Thurin growled, but said no more. Science Director Pelnak's limbs waved slowly, thoughtful. Your vessel defies the known limits of physics. Your advancement is alarming. Tell us, how did your people achieve so much, so quickly? Ilara's answer was quiet, but it carried weight. Because we have no choice. Humanity has always lived on the edge of extinction. Fire, famine, plague, war, each time we fall, we rise again. We do not advance in centuries, but in generations. Not because we are wise, but because we are desperate. Desperation teaches faster than peace. The council fell silent. Admiral Kane stepped forward, his voice iron. If you fear humanity, you are right to. We are not tame. But know this, we are also not your enemy. We will not bow. We will not kneel. But if you offer your hand, we will take it. Chancellor Vex's eyes studied them, weighing centuries of precedent against the unknown before him. He saw in these humans both danger and promise, destruction and renewal. His voice rumbled through the chamber. The Council acknowledges the presence of Earth among the stars. The question remains, will you stand with us, or apart from us? Before Ilara could answer, the chamber trembled. Not from weapons, not from engines, but from something deeper, a pulse through the station itself. Lights flickered. Holograms wavered. For an instant, every being in the chamber felt a presence pressing against their minds, vast and cold, like the echo of something older than creation. Then it was gone. Pelnak recoiled, his limbs trembling. That was not the humans. Kilaron's crystalline body dimmed in fear. No. That was something else. Ilara turned sharply to Kane, but his expression told her he had felt it too. Whatever it was, it had not come from humanity. It had come from beyond. Chancellor Vex's voice was low, grave. The station is ancient. Built before the Council, before our histories. Some say it was left by the first builders, the ones we call the architects. A murmur of dread passed through the chamber. The architects, a name spoken in whispers, a myth of civilizations. That had risen and vanished long before any now alive. Legends told of their creations, scattered ruins on dead worlds, technology beyond comprehension. Ilara's voice was steady, though her heart pounded. Then perhaps the Goliath was not built too early, but too late. The council chamber was still. For the first time in generations, the galaxy looked not inward, at rivalries and politics, but outward, into the dark, where something vast might be stirring. Humanity had arrived in silence. But their silence carried a warning. They were not alone. None of them were. And somewhere, beyond the reach of even the council, the architects were awakening.